blockade. And for more, I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, why did Russia not go ahead and attack this ship as it said it would?
Well, I think there are several reasons for this. The first one is that Ukraine has said right the way down the line that it is going to give proof that these are just civilian ships. They're not carrying military equipment. They're not carrying soldiers. They're not taking weapons to Ukraine. What they're doing is taking grain from the port of Odesa, you can see on the map here, through the Black Sea down to the Bosphorus Strait and over into Turkish territory. This time round, they've been traveling very close to the sea border with Romania to make it easier to travel that way and more complicated for the Russians to open an attack on that ship. There is also another reason, I think, and that is that Russia knows that the world is keeping an eye on what's going on there, and it needs those grain exports, which Russia can't meet on its own. There are large amounts of grain coming from Ukraine, which are needed by countries in Africa, for example, and also the Middle East. 46% of sunflower oil comes from Ukraine, and therefore it's important that at least some of that grain gets out of Ukraine and is given to other countries. Russia is under pressure to come back to the negotiating table to try to restart that grain accord and doesn't want to be seen as the bad guy, I think, more than it's being looked upon or perceived as being in the war in Ukraine. So that may explain why this is the second ship that's got through the Black Sea down to Turkey so far and managed to bring that grain supply, which will then be sent to other countries. It's not an easy job to do, and there are other routes that are available over land, but much more complicated for Ukraine. So I think that any ship that does get through is going to be welcomed by the international community.
Philip, this comes, I was saying earlier, as President Erdogan of Turkey is expected to visit Russia's President Putin to try and kickstart the deal again. What chance does he have?
Well, I think he believes that he has a fairly good chance of kickstarting that deal. He has close ties with both Ukraine and with Russia, in particular with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's probably the only world leader who can go to the negotiating table separately with both men and say, right, we have to get this deal sorted out. There are reports, Bloomberg is giving reports today that the meeting will take place in Sochi and that the Turkish president is going to travel there probably around the 8th of September before he goes on to the G20 meeting in India. Of course, Vladimir Putin won't be going there because of the international arrest warrant, so this will be an occasion for both men to get round the negotiating table to talk to each other about the Black Sea grain deal and bringing Russia back on board. What Russia is angry about here and why it pulled out of the deal is because it says that it's being discriminated against by sanctions which were introduced by the West, which are stopping Russian farmers from exporting their grain. It also says that Ukraine is not really supplying enough grain to the rest of the world. It's not going to the markets that it's supposed to go to, and therefore Russia is also being discriminated against. And there are many other reasons that the Russians perceive as being unjust as far as their farmers and their production of grain is concerned, and that is why they've decided to pull out of this deal. But we'll see what President Erdogan manages to do if he does get to talk to President Putin, whether that agreement could eventually get back onto the negotiating table.
All right, Philip, thank you for that. France 24's Philip Turle.